You have listened to the stories of 7 extraordinary or amazing people who have dedicated their lives to making sure that all Americans have equal rights. What are equal rights? These great Americans were able to bring about changes that resulted in new, fairer laws. They were able to do this because the United States, since its creation, has had a democratic form of government. A democratic form of government is one that includes the right of people to vote for their leaders. This means that the citizens of the United States are involved in the political process. People can vote for political leaders who represent their interests and needs. What group of people could not vote in the United States until 1920? Women, that's right. Great job. It took a while for every American adult to gain the right to vote, but eventually it happened. Now each person has an equal say in deciding what kind of government they want. In order to vote in the United States, a person must be 18 years old and a citizen. That means he or she must have been born in the United States, have parents who are American citizens, or have been granted citizenship. People who are granted citizenship are called naturalized citizens. Naturalized citizens are people who were born in another country but have chosen to become citizens of the United States. Every 2 years and every 4 years, important elections are held. People go to places called polls to vote. As you have learned, the right to vote is called suffrage. Voters can decide who should lead their state and who should lead their nation. They can help decide if taxes or money should be raised by the government to pay for important things communities need, such as hospitals, schools, and libraries, or whether taxes should be reduced so that people have a little more money to spend. These are important choices that affect all Americans. Suffrage is a way of making sure the government is following the wishes of the people it serves. Today, we take for granted that adult American citizens have the right to vote. We hardly think about it at all. But you have heard about the journey that these people a long time ago went on to make this a reality. You have also heard about the obstacles that were placed in their paths along the way. Obstacles are people or things standing in the way of an action, preventing something from happening. Now let's review the lives of the brave people you have just learned about. What is Susan B. Anthony famous for? Susan B. Anthony worked to expand women's rights in America, especially the right to vote. A woman must not depend upon the protection of man, but must be taught to protect herself, she once said. Susan was a famous leader of the women's rights movements. Sadly, Susan did not live to see the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920, which made it legal for women to vote. Without Susan's efforts, however, the battle for women's rights might have gone on for much longer. What is another cause for which Susan B. Anthony fought for? Eleanor Roosevelt worked to improve the civil rights and human rights of many groups of people in the United States. What are civil rights? What are some of the human rights? During the Great Depression, Eleanor worked tirelessly to help those most in need. Eleanor believed that all people should be created fairly and equally and with respect. Later in her life, Eleanor worked for the United Nations. She took her message of freedom and equality all over the world. Do you remember who Eleanor Roosevelt's husband was? Mary McLeod Bethune worked to create educational opportunities for African Americans, especially girls, during the time of segregation. What is segregation? Mary opened a school that eventually became a 4-year college, and she helped many African American men gain the skills they needed to be able to vote. Mary worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt and a talented team of African American advisors to improve opportunities for all Americans. It is said that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. What does the phrase "broke the color barrier" mean? He became the first African American to play Major League Baseball. When Branch Rickey, the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, invited Jackie to play for his team, they both knew that they were attempting to change people's attitudes and end discrimination in American sports. In 1947, when Jackie played in his first Major League game at Ebbets Field, he proved that he was not only an incredible baseball player, but he was also a man who had great courage. What does courage mean? Jackie made the world a better place. At the end of Jackie's first season with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he was chosen to be Rookie of the Year, and baseball was finally integrated so that people of any race could play together. On that cold December night in 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat, the world changed. Rosa's action led to the Montgomery bus boycott. What is a boycott? The power of so many people coming together to end unfair laws ultimately led to the end of legal segregation in the South. Today, many people feel that the civil rights movement really began in that moment when Rosa Parks said no. That is why Rosa is called the mother of the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the peaceful leader of the civil rights movement. He led the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. Martin promoted change and the achievement of equal rights through nonviolence. What is nonviolence? Martin's powerful speeches changed people's hearts and minds. He led the way to change the laws that were 100 years old, allowing African Americans to fully participate in American society. As a nation, we honor Martin's work each year on the third Monday in the month of January. Cesar Chavez was once a migrant worker. What is a migrant worker? Members of his family were migrant workers also. During those years, Cesar became very aware of how hard life could be for people without any rights or protections. Migrant workers worked long hours for little pay. They often lived in overcrowded camps. Migrant workers could rarely afford health care. Cesar vowed to change all of this. He dedicated his life to making sure all farm workers, including migrant workers, had certain basic rights. Cesar brought people together and created a labor union called National Farm Workers Association. Eventually, through his efforts, Cesar succeeded in getting better pay and working conditions for all migrant workers. Without his determined leadership, these things might have never happened. Today, there are many people who work to make sure everyone in the United States is treated fairly and that their rights are respected. As just one example, it is important that people who have disabilities and who are challenged physically or mentally are treated fairly and equally too. Disabilities are physical or mental conditions that, without the right support, might limit someone in some way. People with disabilities might have trouble seeing or hearing, or even walking. They might need to use wheelchairs, walkers, hearing aids, or service dogs. They may have to use special devices to help them talk on a telephone, or they may use service dogs to guide them along sidewalks and into buildings. On July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed a new law called the Americans with Disabilities Act. This law gives protection to people with disabilities. For one thing, this law states that all people should be allowed easier access to all places people enjoy going to, such as restaurants, movie theaters, libraries, and other buildings and public places. The law also states that public transportation, such as buses and trains, must have paths and entries that are easy to manage, such as ramps, lifts, or elevators. This law also offers help to those people who have diseases that are not curable and diseases that make it hard for people to take care of themselves. And so, you see, it is important that we stand up and recognize when people are being treated unfairly. We have just one world that we all share together. No person, because of the color of their skin, no cultural group or religious group, should ever be treated unfairly. We have a responsibility to treat all human beings with dignity and respect. Dignity means a sense of respect and honor. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter.